Hi YouTube, welcome back to another Feedback Friday. We're going to start this week with a special one. We're going to take a look at the new figure from El Miniaturista, Mr. Juan, and sculpted by Ivan Mata. We're gonna critique this one. I'm not doing this, just out of my own choice. It's not like I'm just gonna shred him. We're just gonna shred him. No, he asked if I could give him feedback on it, and I thought it would be interesting for you guys to see, critiquing another professional's work. So yeah, let's look into it and see what he did. First of all, sculpt super cool. I believe that you can get it on My Mini Factory. If you like the sculpt, it's a STL. And hold on, I have the My Mini Factory Frontiers campaign. He told me where you can get it. So if you like the figure, and I've complained about some of the STLs you guys paint. Well, if you're into 3D printing, here's a good one. So we're going to take a look and see what he did and what I think he could do better. But one thing I'm gonna comment on Juan's work is that he's not the most technically refined painter, right? He's not like super blended or anything. But when you look at the piece as a whole, I think it works quite well. Okay. For me, I think the lighting and stuff all works quite nice. I think the cast shadow is done quite well. I also really like this kind of subtle blue rim light that he's got going on. I think it's interesting to look at it from the side so you can see sort of how it works from the side. So I think this is done quite well. Let's actually start with the rim light. Okay. So one thing about the rim light here is that I don't think he brought it around quite enough. So I think he could have taken this a bit higher, right? I think he could have done a little more on the back of the head. Okay, brought this around a little bit more. And same on the arm, right? So as you come around the back side of the model, could have been a little more aggressive, I guess, a little more bold with how big this is, especially here down on the tricep and stuff. Have some of it come onto the arm down here like this. Okay. So I think that's the first thing I see is probably make that light a little more consistent. All right. See sort of the difference there. Good morning. Okay. So that's what I would do with a bit of the rim light. He did, however, render it quite nicely. It's not overly, a lot of times I see like this where they just, where people, if you look at it from the side, they'll do something like, I'm going to do it really exaggerated. Okay. They'll do something like this. All right. And you literally see that people paint a line. Okay. This is not very good. in my opinion. It can work from like if it's 4 photographs. This is how we did it on the this is basically how we did it on like the Marvel United figures. If you know the ones, the chibi ones for Cool Mini or not. But those were made to be photographed from like a very specific angle. I think this works better as a more natural secondary light. Okay. In terms of the front, I don't think the lights are too white. I think they're pretty good. One spot I do notice that if we're considering like his head here is coming down with the cast shadow, like it's casting a shadow over his neck. I would have liked to see a bit more light. This can always be tough because it's like you actually want to try and sneak a little more light into here on the neck where it's on the light side, okay? So getting a bit more light here, and also I wouldn't mind like maybe just having this come up a little higher, and then you can have this kind of creep around a little bit, something like that. And then we need to push the light a little more on the neck in order to make that lighting direction just a little more clear. So you get these nice highlights like in the neck here. And this will make that lighting direction just a little more obvious, okay? So you can see sort of the difference. Good morning, Eric with an H. Hello, thanks for the tier 1. Okay, see the difference on that? All right, so that's one thing. I actually really like the colors in the skin. I think it works quite well. I think the scars and stuff work quite nice. This is another one having a little more light on like the shirt too. There you go. Something like that. Okay. So really showing there. I like the colors in the oh, Eric, thanks for the 5 gifted subs. Appreciate it, man. Thank you very much. So where was I? The non-metallic is quite good. Don't have too much to say there. There's a little bit that's sort of weird here where I think this got a little too white. I would have done it just a bit more greenish. But in general, I think this is quite strong. This is really nice up here, where I know this can be oftentimes pretty difficult to understand how to render sort of flat fingers. Oh, we're getting to that, Don. Hello. I know it can be often quite difficult to render flat sides like this. I do notice there's like a little bit here where as it comes around the back, I probably would have, that's the wrong color. I probably would have tried to catch some of these flat surfaces a little more. Make these line up a little better with this main highlight. And I know it's quite sketched, but yeah, this is solid work here. Probably also catching some light, a little more light on these top parts of these fingers. Maybe actually using a little bit of the blue if they're not facing directly at the main light source, right? If we're talking about the non-metallic here, right? You want the whitest parts to be where that main light source is, right? So we need to think about the direction of the sun and where is the sun coming from, right? So if the sun is coming in from the top right, we want the main reflection to also be more towards the top right. So I think he may have actually pushed some of these panels a little too far left for the main highlight. It could have been a different main view than this. Isn't that the official box art for the... Yes, it is, Dress. He asked me to critique it, so we are. He said, tear it up. And I said, okay. So I think I maybe would have adjusted them a little more so that the white is a bit more on like facing a little more this direction, you know. Then you can add, if you're dealing with the sun here, I often find it nice to add like just a little bit of warmth around the sun reflection. They can make for a nice touch to separate that. Who's that? Yama? Yama Paints Minis? Hello? Or is it Llama? Is it Yama or Llama? I don't know. All right, now the hand. All right, I've been getting pretty obsessed with hands recently. So the face, I think, is pretty good. Okay. There maybe could be a little bit more shadows on the face. I think he could have gone a little bit darker in some spots. This is inconsistent too with the rest of the lighting, but it's okay. Yeah, I think he could have pushed some of the shadows here and like the occlusion shadows in around like some of the facial features just a little bit more. But I don't think it's been. Oh, hype chest, open it. So that's one thing. And then the other thing is I understand that he's not, like I said earlier, he's not the most rendered painter. He has a tendency to get a little sketchy, which is fine. But I would spend a little extra time on the hand like you did on the face, right? Go away, phone. You're annoying. Just a little bit more time on the hands would create for a bit nicer, because it's a bit of point of, you know, this is one of our focal areas. Spending just a few, you know, extra 20 minutes or something on the hands here could really help, like, make this piece a little bit more, you know? So something like this, and then maybe a little more light on here. Then I would take and add some tonal variation into like the knuckles. The fingers also tend to be a bit more reddish. Then I think he probably overdid the veins. Okay, so by highlighting the veins, when I'm doing veins, it's the shadow is more important than the highlight. Okay, so you really don't want to do the highlight so much. You more want to think about like the shadow of the vein. And the shadow is more like a mid-tone, but you can make them nice and rounded. So you create that sort of soft shadow right there. It's very easy to overdo this too. You want them to be sort of subtle. Okay, so here I think like this one is probably too bright, so I would come back and kind of tone this down a little. In fact, they're probably all, other than the one like closest to the highlight, they're probably all a little too bright. Okay, so something like that I think would make for just a little more natural. Okay, so the little shadows help it stand out or make them a little more three-dimensional, you know. And people, one last little thing about hands is people often put highlights on the knuckles, but they forget that you can also get these sort of highlights here in the valleys between the knuckle bones, okay? I don't have super predominant knuckles. Let's see if I can show it. Right? But you get, sometimes you can get, yeah, sadly mine are just not quite bony enough to see, but you can get highlights in between the knuckles too, okay? I'm not vascular like that. Vascular and bony. All right. So I think a few of those things together, you know, it's just some small touches here and there, would add up to a bit more consistent, like on the lighting, and then a little more definition in some specific areas. Okay? Cool. All right. Now, let's get to the Discord. We're going to go to last week. Okay. Hey Eric, kindly have a look at my latest project in 75mm. I don't have competitions in your home, but still want to keep on learning from my mistakes. We got Russell Crowe here. Let's take a look at Russell. My name is Maximus Aurelius. What was his name? What was... I wish I remembered the whole line. My name is Maximus Aurelius Augustus. The area... To me, the area of chest right next to the robotic arm seemed too bright. No, it's fine. Looks good. Here. Okay. So what do we think? I think the face is pretty well rendered. I mean, it looks quite a bit like him. I think if I had one big point of feedback for you, would just be like you need to render, like you need to be a little more precise. Okay, precision here is gonna help. And I don't know if it's the sculpt or whatnot, but some of the line thickness is a little much. Like, I know that these parts can be quite difficult, but really trying to like make sure that these are all nice and defined, you know. Don't over edge highlight these either. The edge of these is supposed to also be leather. So like you don't want them to look like a different, like they're metal, right? Because he's got different materials here. Okay, so you know he has the leather parts and then the metal parts. I'm also a little confused by the shield. It's probably a little too blue. But yeah, try and just be a little more precise, right? I think that can go a long way. It's a little noisy in some of these parts, right? So trying to define these elements a little bit more here, like even on these, trying to define these a little bit more. The big thing I'm seeing is the shield. So the shield is weird. So I assume the shield is supposed to be reflecting the sky and the ground. And is it metal? Right? So one, if it's reflecting the ground, right, you're doing this sort of cast shadows thing, which is cool. The lighting direction is really strong this way. Well, what's going on with the ground here on the shield? Oh, here we go. My name is Maximus Decimus Meridius, commander of the armies of the North, general of the Felix legions, and loyal servant to the true emperor, Marcus Aurelius, father to a murdered son, husband to a murdered wife, and I will have my vengeance in this life or the next. There you go. Thank you. It's a good movie. By the way, the second movie, terrible. My name is Jeb. The second one was so bad. Yeah, so the base, right? So you want to think about the base this way. Like there's still light on the ground way out here, like where it's reflecting on the shield, right? So I know this could be a little awkward, but even though this isn't getting direct sunlight, the ground of the shield would still be getting like a warm ground reflection on it, you know? Because it's not that the shield is in shadow, it's that it's reflecting, it's what it's reflecting, right? So it's reflecting the ground that's in light. And also, you probably want to think about like the fact he's in a coliseum, and that means that like probably more of this is going to be like the stands and stuff. So a little more grays and less sky, right? Because the sky is going to come up like it's going to be a much smaller portion of the shield because he's in an arena, right? There's only so much room for sky to be in there. So yeah, you need to think of really like it could be this could be difficult, but you got to really think about like, okay, what is, you know, what is this reflecting? What is it surrounding? You're just using a little too much blue. Okay, so something like that maybe feels a little more natural, right? The shoulders and stuff are nice. There is a thing here where you're doing cast shadows, right? So this shadow comes across the arm this way. That means the back of the arm should basically be in shadow, and these two shadows should converge into each other, all right? Make sure that you don't have darker cast shadows as the shadow like wraps around. It just becomes one shadow form. Looks like you did a good job doing it here on the leg. So that same principle applies. And this one has a bit of the same problem that Juan's did, where if the light's coming in from this direction, a little more of the neck would be in light. I find people tend to overshadow the neck. The face is, like I said, the face is actually really, really good on this. But maybe pushing the light just in a few spots a little bit more. And yeah, okay. Jack F.R. Street. I don't know. Jack Frost. Without the O. Jack, no O Frost. All right. Cool. Makes sense. I hope so. Very good. Sir Gwent, hello Eric. It's unlikely I'll make it to the stream, but that's fine. Would love some general feedback and some ways to keep the hair reading as white without looking so flat. Okay. Yeah, that was his helmet. That's where MF Doom got the helmet from. It was originally from Gladiator. That's funny. It's like it reminds me of the Kanye thing when he did like a song with Paul McCartney, and people were like, dude, can't believe Kanye is doing this song with this old white guy. His career's gonna blow up. And it's like, he's only one of the biggest recording artists of all time. Okay. So, general feedback is it's coming along. It's like some of the rendering here, like the volume interpretation is quite good. But we're going to do the thing. We're working with a lot of grays and blues here, okay? So, I think you've done a pretty decent job. But I think we could push it a little bit more, all right? There is some parts here. I think the hair is actually better than you think it is. You can see some of these, specifically the black leather parts, when I do this, don't really look black anymore, do they? Like, maybe these ones on this side do. But this side, you've overdone it. You overdid it. Okay? So, let's come back. All right. So we need to tone down some of these parts. All right. What's that? Strifer 9999. Hello. All right. Don't, guys, like, don't. I know it can be really hard because you're like, I gotta push the contrast. I gotta. Like, it could be so easy to like overdo the rendering here or the lights and push the contrast too much, and then this piece no longer looks like a black material. Okay, so like when you have a dark material like this, just let it be dark, you know. Okay, now that reads as black. It's now the darkest. Here. Go on top. All right, go underneath. Thank you. See the difference? Baby Stapler, thanks for the tier 1 for 3 months. Thank you very much. Right, so you've got, right, this reads now as a darker material. This material separation is so important. And I think you did quite a good job on some of the other parts, but then it got a little away from you on the black leather parts, all right? Now, for the blue parts, this is maybe where I would try and shift the color a little bit more. So if the green, like, because you're kind of doing it blue, like, like a color layer here. So I would take and sort of glaze in maybe like a slightly more violet tone to it in order to get it further away from the skin, okay? Because the skin has like a more greenish blue tendency to it, and this might help it feel a little more separate. So just by adjusting the color a little bit more, we create a little more separation between the skin and whatever these cloth parts are. This also helps tie in that like reddish gem here. And then the hair, dude, I think you actually did a pretty good job on the hair. Like, you didn't overdo it. I know it could be like weird to go just like, it feels kind of flat. It's like, yeah, because it's really bright. Like, you could maybe try and give a little more shape with like a more tone like this, right? We could come in and add just a bit more shadows to some areas to try and like make some of these shapes a little more defined. The larger sections of hair, right? But you really don't want to overdo this, okay? It can quickly get away from you, and then you lose that look of like, no, this is supposed to be white, right? But if you really feel like it needs a little more shape, try coming in and just adding a bit more darker lines to it to give some form, right? Separate some of the larger strands of hair from each other. Okay. Make sense, guys? I hope so. Cool beans. Black cat. Hi, Eric. I wanted to submit this for Nova for the Journeyman division and got feedback from Ricardo. I just want to see if you can give your feedback on this as well and see what I can improve on so that I can take that knowledge into future projects. Sure. Looks like you did a pretty nice job with the backlighting. I wonder what... I didn't see what this received, so I don't know. I was not a judge of the Journeyman division. But overall, it looks like it's quite nice. Good separation. Good color separation, like good value separation between elements. Things that are dark, read dark. Things that are white, read white, you know. Different textures for different materials. So I think overall this is quite good. I think we could push that a little bit more. Right? Now I think you need some you need to push it a little bit more in some spots, all right? So some of them can look a little flat. So think about like the headphones, yeah? Like what are these made out of? Okay? So if these are made out of like they're probably plastic, right? Almost guaranteed. Okay? Well, let's look at something that's red plastic real quick. All right. Look at the highlights on red. Look how a red plastic looks, right? It's all quite red, but then it has very white highlights, right? And they're quite sharp. Okay. So what I think we can do here is you can push those highlights a little bit more, and you want to leave them quite sharp. So it's like, let's make this thing look plasticky, right? So putting some actual just like sharp white highlights on here can change the look of that material, right? Like this part is probably not plastic. It's probably like a fake leather or something. But this way we can create that look of plastic by putting a shine, right? And that's true for quite a bit of materials, okay? So you need to like, I think what you need to do now is you need to be thinking about highlights, right? The way you think about non-metallic and how different materials are going to have different levels of shine to them, right? Even the coat, I think you did a pretty good job, but I still think you maybe could have pushed it a little bit more, right? Like you've got some of these nice highlights here. But I think these could be, depending on like this material, polyester or whatever these kind of puffy jackets are made out of, they can tend to be like, the shine on them can be quite stark, you know? So is it polyester? Do you guys know what the stuff is made out of? Yeah, you need some specular highlights. Nylon. Oh, that makes sense. It's like they always remind me of like sleeping bag material. Like you're just wearing a wearable sleeping bag. Okay, so the difference there, right? Like those bits of highlights, right, can make for a more interesting look. And then you can push it even more and add some like little highlights inside those, you know? Okay. So think about highlights a little more. Think about like the different materials, how those materials are going to look, right? Like this material is rendered well, but then other parts, like even leather and stuff, you know, is going to have, maybe leather is going to have a little more shine to it. This is plastic, so it's got a little more shine. Where if this is like a wool skirt, you know, it's going to be a little softer, right? Looks like also the edge of it got a little away from you, but like what are her leggings made out of? You know, this is good. This looks like cotton or wool socks. Like they're not going to be very shiny. But then maybe like the boots, if the boots are leather, right? Like maybe we need to add a little bit more shine to the boots in some areas. Leather can be quite shiny. This also gives you a chance to give a little more definition to some parts. I also think that probably would have worked better as like red maybe for the shoes, like do some black and red sneakers or something, kind of match the headphones, but I don't think it's bad. Yeah. So yeah. Same for satin or silk. Any sort of, you think about like the highlights on a material and how clear those highlights are kind of tells you what the finish on them is. Things that are more glossy have a sharper, more intense highlight, or things that are more matte have a much more soft, diffused highlight. Okay? Talking about specular highlights. Yeah. All right, so other than that, nice job. Maybe could have pushed the ambience a little more. I don't quite get a sense of like what time of day it is. Like based on the backlighting, you know, it's a little flat in terms of the ambience. So even doing something, well, can we do this and then apply a no, okay, well, either way, yeah, play around with like the colors and the shadows and stuff. The roof probably, yes, the roof needs more reflections too. Lots of things need more reflections. I think that, is this Asa? Is this Neko Galaxy? I believe this is Katja that sculpted this, but I'm not positive. No, she's occasionally in the chat. Oh, it is Asa. Okay. Oh, it's from her My Mini Factory. Well, there you go. Another good STL for you STL people. Rude. Hi, Eric. I finished my first 75mm model, and I'd be happy to hear your thoughts and feedback on what could be improved. Okay. Looks pretty good to me. All right, so the first thing that stands out to me, just immediately, presentation wise, this should be bigger. Okay. I'm not saying that the base needs to be like at least wider than the shoulders. All right. So right now you've got like this and like this, right? So it's like this is the same distance, at least wider than the shoulder, especially on a 75 millimeter like this. Like, it's going to make the model feel more balanced, right? So if it was like the base was like this instead, and then you had it more like coming out like this, it feels top heavy at the moment, right? So that's a presentation thing. I don't know, Carm. I don't know why I didn't tell you. Jerks. I'm gonna guess you maybe followed a little bit along with like the Sergio Calvo one. The gems look very Sergio, so or not the glass beads or whatever of his necklace. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think it's pretty good. The one of the things that maybe stands out to me the most, besides the presentation, is the bone is like a little lost. It's probably a little too just like dull gray. So maybe adding a little color to it could help. Either going warmer or darker, or yeah, probably warmer, but maybe not like super orangey, maybe more like a yellowish, sort of khaki kind of color would help it stand out more against the snow, right? Something, I say like a greenish, but it's like this sort of yellowish khaki could help to make it stand out a little bit more. Because it is a bit too just like white at the moment. So some undertones. Do I have a Swinson base sizing guide you'd be willing to share? No. I don't think there is like, I think there's some like general composition rules you can follow, but I don't think there's any like, there's no like hard rules. Jack Frost. Is there a rules or guidance on submitting to this? I'm trying to improve at painting, and your directed critique has been very good to watch. So you must be a sub and then join the Discord, and you need to connect your Discord to your Twitch account once you're in the Discord. !Discord to join the Discord. ABC Sean, thanks for following and the tier 1. Appreciate it. Okay. Other than that, man, I think this is quite good. Like, you probably, I think if there's one thing I can look at and say, like, maybe focus some practice on would be metallics here. I think they're not bad, but they're not great either. Like, I could see you're kind of getting there, but maybe there's a little lack of confidence on exactly where to place the highlights, right? And these are weird shapes to try and do, but I think you could yeah, one of the things to work on would definitely be like sharpening this stuff up. I notice I'm like on the wrong layer, which is why this is not working. Right? So you want to think about like certain shapes are gonna right, like the front of this is going to be more highlighted. This just has like no shape to it right now, so these like thinner lines, and don't tell me you can't paint thin lines because I can see it on this that you can. So find the general shape first and then do the edges, okay? So it seems like, yeah, you've sort of placed the light, but then you don't quite have like the light super consistent. So it's like here's if the light's here, then it's here, then it's down here. Right. They need to match. You can do stuff like this where the light like chases that inside line, right? There's this here, so that means that like this part is going to be more highlighted. Anywhere where it's yeah, the same like orientation. Okay. Thanks, Sean. Yeah, try and just like when you're doing stuff like this like super complex metallic shapes, this is often a good time to like take a reference photo of like the primer, and then you can kind of see where the main highlight is on each one. Because this type of stuff gets super weird as you go, because then you're gonna get like reflections like this where you have stronger yellow reflections on areas that are gonna like reflect the metal itself. So it's like the light bounces off of this and then comes up here and bounces and lights that part of the metal up, right? So you actually get stronger yellowish reflections where the metal is reflecting itself. Hope that was helpful. But really nice job. Just keep going. And yeah, think a little more about before you just like get started painting them. Like, think about the base, you know? Don't let the base be an afterthought. All right? Radek, hello. I'm working on this pirate treasure scene with a magical water inside a cave, and I want to add a backdrop showing the cave entrance with a view of the sea and a ship at night. Okay. Oh, Jesus. Okay. I'm not sure about the NMM and the OSL from the magical waters. Could you give me some feedback or advice? I think the OSL is actually pretty good. Looks pretty good to me. So let me ask something, you guys. Okay, this one's for the viewers. Complicated backdrop. Who are you, me? Yeah. So about the backdrop, do you guys think this figure needs a backdrop? Do you think that adding a really noisy, complicated backdrop would do anything for this figure? Well, there you go, Raddick. I think you got your answer on the backdrop. Yeah, and it doesn't need to be, like, the whole point of a backdrop. What's the loud noise? A plane? A jet? You can hear that jet? Yeah, it's Godzilla. No, it's just a jet. Welcome to... I don't know if that's a commercial jet or if that's a... like a Navy jet. Anyways, I don't think the scene needs it. I don't think it's going to do anything to make the scene other than add clutter. And then, like, he's going to take up majority of the scene, so even if you did add something behind him, like, you're going to add something behind him, well, you got to frame him somehow. The whole point of a backdrop is to, like, frame the character and put them in a setting. You've already done that. Like, I don't think this character needs framing. He's huge and imposing. Like, he has a nice silhouette on his own. So I don't think... I don't think you need a big scene, right? Like... And then you want to talk about, like, a cave entrance. Like, he's going to take up the whole entrance. And then you want to put, like, a ship in the background. It's all just going to be behind him. I don't know. It doesn't... I don't think you need it. All right? My whole point is, I think the figure works fine on its own. In terms of the OSL, like I said, the OSL works really well. I think the copper is a little weak. So I think for me that's probably the weakest part. The bird's also a little hard to see. So if I was going to adjust one thing, I would probably try and push some of this, like, copper metal a little bit more, especially, like, there's some parts down here, like these highlights, they're just too small. Like, they need to repeat in areas, okay? Like, if you have this line right here, that means that's going to show up on this also. Okay, so this will give a little more definition. Need to push some of these lights on these metals a little bit more. All right. Here you've done a pretty good job, but I think you could be a bit more volumetric with some of the, like, the reflections on the upper parts here. Define this a little more. All right. This light doesn't really make sense. Okay, you have an upward facing light here, so this should really be like upper light. And then if you want to add some blue to it, you put it underneath. Right, so it's more like here. Maybe get some in the shadows of these parts. And then the gun has like plenty of space to play with those. Right, so all of these planes have some room to play around with some of the like blue watery reflection, you know? Who's that? Breeze. The raid. Hello, welcome in. How's everyone doing? Bonsoir. Hello. Bienvenido. I don't know what. I know it. Bienvenue. Maybe? Is it? What's it in French? What's welcome in French? I know it in Spanish. It's got to be like bienvenue, yeah? I probably said it wrong. Oh. You guys aren't French. You said I nailed it, which is... No Frenchman would say that. The best I could ever expect from a French person on my pronunciation is close enough. Fair. Okay, and then yeah, the bird needs a little more definition also. So the last thing for me would be to, yeah, try and create a little more definition here on the feathers and stuff. Like some of the shadows underneath are a little too dark, so I'm losing a bit of the shape here. So try and pop some of that out a little bit more. But I like the scene overall. Like, colors are nice. You have this more warmer tones up top with more colder tones below. This kind of orange teal ambience, right? Maybe the lights on his face could be a little warmer. I feel like we could maybe add just like a little more warmth to the skin up top. Might help to tie it in and draw a little more attention to the face. Unrelated, I love the last Pariah video since it showed your process for rocky bases kind of statues. Thanks. Okay. So, Breeze, I hope you had a wonderful stream. Sorry, I was in the middle of thinking about these things. Yeah, and have a great rest of your day and evening, and welcome in everyone. My name's Eric. If this is your first time here, we are doing viewer submitted feedback. Or subscriber feedback, I should say. Okay, I'm going to take a quick break. I'll be back, and then we will continue on. All right. Let's look. Who's next? Face. Someone followed my face tutorial. Want feedback on Space Marine face head. It's pretty good. Not bad. Not a bad start. Not a bad start. Let's take a look. All right. So, couple things. Generally, the lighting is pretty good. There's a few parts where we want to add some more definition. All right. So, where do we need to enhance definition? One, we can push some of these like darker reddish tones a little bit more. Specifically, like in the ears, you need a little more definition, a little more red in the ears. I like the red in the face. We can push the definition right here a little bit, around the nose, okay, the bottom of the nose and the nasal labial fold. All right. Head's quite nice. You can push a little more around the mouth. Highlight positions are okay. You want to go a little bit higher. All right, we want to like pull this up, sharpen this a little bit. And I often like to try and favor one side. So another way to increase definition is to really try and get that light nice and sharp up against the hair, okay? The hairline. You want this to be really sharp so that the hair line is quite readable. All right, so don't be afraid to push that light all the way up right next to the hair. Okay, you should be able to see the difference, right? Like one looks kind of muddy. Okay, it's a little hard to see the shape. By pushing that light right up into the hairline, you're going to increase that definition. All right. Now, some shadows, okay? A little more shadow around the jaw. All right, so you want the lower part of the jaw to have a bit more shadow to it. We can enhance this shape a little bit more. I actually like to try and connect this a little bit. This gives a little more manly shape to the jawline. All right. Okay, so something like that. So it's all about finding where to really push the shadows and where to be a little more subtle. All right. So that we create that strong definition and readability, but then we have more nuances where we need to. Okay. So in some of the hair here, we could be a little sharper, like maybe try and push that a little more so that's a little more readable. I like the eyebrows. Eyes aren't bad. I think you maybe did so here's where you maybe went a little too far and made some of the shadow under the eye sockets maybe a little too dark, the lower eyelids. Push the light here just a little bit. Connect this. All right, we can shrink that just a touch to not make him quite so heavy on the eyelids, all right? Kefta, thank you for the tier 1. Appreciate it. Okay. Then maybe add a little bit more red to the mouth. And add a little bit more color to the cheek here. Like I said, you want that red in the ear, and then need to push the light on the teeth just a touch. Okay. All right. And I think you do those things and you'll be a bit happier, right? So you give a little more shape and definition to the face. Okay? All right. Pop secret. Thank you as always, Eric, for the feedback. Just looking for general thoughts on where to improve for this one. I know I need to blackline all the mummy straps, but also but I'll have to come back for that after a rest, or else I'll likely go insane. Fair. Okay. Yeah, this is a really noisy model. There's a lot going on here, okay? And this can be quite difficult when you have this much like yellow and everything to really like give readability to a figure like this, because there's, like I said, there's just so much happening in terms of detail and everything. Like he's got 7 mummies on his back. I don't want to sit here and draw everything because it'll take forever, but if I look at this mummy compared to these, like this one's got more contrast on it and more readability. So yeah, once you get this one and then you get all the like straps and stuff defined, I think it'll help a lot. I also think creating a little more distinction between the gold of the two, like there's just cleanup stuff to do. Like you've got green on things, and you need to black line around stuff and, you know, make stuff sharper. I think you're probably starting too dark on this, right? Like you probably want to be somewhere more like around here, not quite so dark on the actual strap itself. You're kind of like overdoing the initial layer of the straps. All right, so the shadows are just like too dark in the straps at the moment, so lighten this up a little bit. Yes, they still need the dark lining between them, but there's too much shadow like on the actual strap itself. Okay, so don't feel like you need to create the inside of the strap, like the main section of the strap, quite so dark. And then when you push up from there, like you can use that color that you're using as a dark line in between, but then like push that up more. So something like this, right? This probably comes from using some kind of wash or something, I'm guessing. Or you just didn't start bright enough. right? Then you can start to define the edges and paint the dark lining in between each strap. But this is going to help further separate this from the gold, right? And make all these straps a bit more readable. This happens a lot when you do like any sort of model with like a lot of wood and leather, things like wood elves and stuff, where you have a lot of just like browns. Yeah, you use known oil. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. So try and be a little more selective with where you use the wash. Try and keep it just between the straps and stuff. All right, or like come back in, try and do it by hand, right? So it's like you want the separation between straps. You don't necessarily want a bunch of shadow in the strap itself. Okay. And you should be able to see now, like where I've drawn these. Okay. That these strap, like look at the leg. See, this is like kind of muddy and lost. And this is like, oh, okay, I can clearly see these individual straps. All right. Okay, so this is how we push the definition here. One of my least favorite things to paint ever. Feathers and straps. But yeah, cool. I think you do that on like all the mummies, and that'll go a long way on to adding more readability to the piece and separate it from the gold more. I also don't like the green. Get rid of the green. It feels a little on its own. What I would do is I would change this part real quick. I would change this part to gold so these connect like this. And then maybe reuse this sort of color here and just continue this back like that. The green, because the green's a little weird and stands out on its own. And then I would try and use this a little more in other places. And so it's like purple, red, and then this kind of teal color or something. All right. Warwolf. Hello, Eric. Hope you're doing well. Could you give me some feedback on this piece? Does the cast shadow work from the general lighting? Does the cast shadow work with the general lighting of the scene? Have I raised the light values to the right level? Maybe the unknown metal from the blade is a bit weird. I know I still need to do some touch-ups here and there. Sure. Let's take a look. Let's look at the side view since it's a little more clear. You're asking about the shadows. Do the shadows work, guys? Do they work? So, yeah. It's a little muddy at the moment. The shape just isn't quite clear enough. I'm not getting like a good sense of like the silhouette, okay? Like I don't quite see where the silhouette of his body is supposed to be. I'm guessing it's something like this. The problem comes from this is that when you're doing this sort of thing, okay, when you're doing shadows like this, we need to think about like what sort of tone these shadows are going to be. So it's like if we're going to do some sort of cast shadow, right? We need to think about like the value of those shadows, okay? And how those, if they're going to be like this or whatever they are, right? So we're doing some sort of shadow like this, okay? But that means that shadow needs to show up like on the back of this column, because this column is going to have the same lighting direction as the rest of the base, right? That means it needs to be on like the back of the rocks. It needs to show up like in the cracks. The cracks are going to be even darker actually because of occlusion shadows, right? So yeah, and that means that like the back of the model is also going to be quite dark. So is like the back of his hand dark enough? Have we made the same change in value from this to this, right? Let's look at the change in value here. If this is the lights and this is sort of the shadow value, okay, from here to there, does the other parts do the same? Okay, so these are highlights. I don't really want to look at those too much. But it's like, here's the skin, and then what's the shadow of the skin? It's like this, or this, or this. Do these feel the same to you? Let's open the color selector, right? So here we're way up top, and then we go about halfway down. Here we're like up top, and then we barely shift, right? Did you see that? It went from like here to here. So that means the shadows of the orc skin need to be, instead of up here, they need to be like down here. So it's really important, guys, that you like that everything kind of changes evenly. And then when you're doing any sort of like shadow work like this, like you need to be thinking about like not just the shape, like you can't just have a cast shadow and then not reflect that same lighting on the rest of the figure, okay? It needs to be consistent across the form, you know? The cast shadow is like, it's just there to supplement the lighting direction, you know? It's like, oh, we're doing a very harsh lighting, so the light of everything needs to change, all right? So you need to make sure that, yeah, that you're not just drawing a shape underneath them. Also, the shadow should all be the same color, right? It's noticeably brighter on the stone. No, the shadow should not all be the same color. The shadow needs to change proportionally depending on what the material color is. All right, like this shadow should actually be a little darker than this one because it's a darker sand color. But everything's got to shift equally. Okay? And you have to be very consistent with the lighting direction of everything. Like the back of his leg and everything. And then how does the cast shadows then work on the body, right? Like based on this, should this arm like cast a shadow on him? I don't know. Let's look at the front real fast. Yeah, so you're casting a shadow like downwards under him. But then that arm doesn't cast any sort of shadow on his body. I don't see like a cast shadow here, right? I think you're over pushing your highlights too. Everything looks sort of blown out and white. Yeah. I would just get rid of it, to be honest. I would just get rid of the cast shadow because the rest of the figure doesn't really read that it would have one. Okay. Like it's one of those things where you kind of have to do it everywhere or don't do it. And everywhere, like some you can get rid of, but some distinction stuff. This and this leather feel too similar, so I would work on the sword a little bit. Try and figure something out. I'll probably just go with a steel instead of like trying to do a coppery brass thing. But yeah. Okay. Osobuho. Can I get some feedback on Elric of Malnimides head? Part of a bigger model, of course, aside from smoothing the paint job. I'm working on setting up the light and shadows. I'm imagining him in sort of a cave that has some top light coming in, hence the earthen tones, and of course trying to make him look as pale as... Okay. So when you're working on a piece like this, first things first, do this, okay? You need to come in and like black this stuff out, all right? If you're not going to work on it like right now, like black these elements out because it's going to like, it's really going to help to show a little more shape and definition to the face. Like it's going to give you better context for what sort of darker elements they're going to be. These like whites and things on elements that are going to later be a different color can kind of throw off your perception of how your values and stuff are going. Right, so you need some black here in order to show some general shape to stuff. Captain Darkblade, hello, thanks for the Prime. Appreciate it. Now, what do you guys think of the face right now? Is there any general thoughts at the moment? Like, give it the squint test. Look at it and see if there's something that's bothering you at all. He is very gray. He's supposed to be basically albino. So, besides color variation on his skin, right? Because he is one thing somebody, yeah, Richard pointed out. The side of the nose is really dark. But I think in general, this comes from focusing too much on detail. Yeah, that we don't have like a general, the lighting direction and overall shape of his face isn't quite defined enough. Okay, I think you're trying to push a little too much contrast into a lighter skin tone. This is what happens when you paint in isolation, right? What I mean by that is like you're painting just this white and you're hyper contrasting a white skin, but you don't have the rest of the model in order to give context to how dark everything should be. So what we want to do is we want to give some more general shape to the face, okay? So let's try and take and add some more midtone to some areas. Like the side of his nose, right, is in light. This is in light. Let's go a little brighter. Okay? So this is all in light. This is in light. This is in light. This stuff's in light. So this is good. This here, right? Define your light planes, all right? So now you should see that I've done that. Like now the shadows look really, really dark. Okay? So maybe I like this sort of purplish red you've got here. Maybe the shadows could be something more like this. Right? Okay, we're defining the shadow forms now. It's so easy to like overdo it sometimes when you paint like this in isolation, right? Also, his neck is kind of turned, so that probably means that there's going to be more light here on his neck somewhere. Something like this. Okay? So this is super sketched, but like look at the difference between this and this. Like his face has shape to it now, right? You guys get really lost in details. Then once you've done that, right? Even this stuff down here, it's just too dark. Okay, maybe you can add a little bit of shadow here. Right, then once you've done that, then you start coming in and you add highlights, okay? And those highlights, this is what starts to give like form to these smaller, the micro volumes, okay? So define the major planes first and then add nuance, all right? Then add subtleties. The highlights start to define smaller shapes and form. It shows you how sharp his like cheekbone is, right? His forehead's basically going to be in light. Then you can start to add little wrinkles and stuff. We don't need a shadow here when we can use two highlights with then a light in between. So that light then becomes the shadow in between that creates that shadow between the two planes, right? So it's a mid-tone, it becomes a lighter half-tone that creates those shadows, all right? Little shapes like this is chin, right? You could start to define these smaller forms. Thanks. The swatch painting. Appreciate it. Okay. See the difference? Now he feels pale. Like pale skin. The shapes are a little more clear. Right? And now I have more room to play with a wider value range on other elements. Okay? Then when you need black, now you can use the black to like paint the nostrils and detail around his eyes, right? If he's got black lips, you know. Okay. All right. No, not what I wanted. Discord. Let's watch. Hey, Eric. Heyo. Hey, would love to get some feedback on this piece. Still need to do the horns and spike ball and work on the shoulder. I'm in the right direction for painting skin tone in this shade. Does it read well for the lighting are my main concerns. Followed your video on the Spirit Dwarf for how I did the beard and chest hair. I hope it reads well. Let's look. I like the beard, actually. You lie, you say you didn't save, but I'm sure you did. Yeah, the hair looks great. Hair's really nice. I think, well, again, with the beard and horns, the same thing I said with the what's it called? With the little headband, right, on the last one. Just get a base coat. Get something down on these other elements, because that white primer, man, that could be really distracting for seeing values properly. Okay? But what do we think, guys? How do we feel about this? Like I said, the beard is really good, but what's the thing? What draws everyone's attention? What's the first thing you guys look like? What thing stands out to you the most? Yeah, boy. And in fact, if anything, it's this thing right here. Right? That thing is just immediately like, whoa, look at me. So what's the issue? What do we got to do to the face? What do we need to do? We need to push the light a little bit more. So I think you're using a little too much midtone here, and you need to create some larger planes of light, okay? And then you can push the highlights a little bit more. But we need some, like, his forehead is basically a flat plane, okay? The side of his head, if it's facing towards the light, will be more in light, right? So yeah, you're also getting a little too lost in details a little too early, all right? So let's push the light. Let's like bring this up, all right? So that we can draw some more attention to the face, all right? Then you can push highlights and like then you can add like little details and stuff to the nose, etc., where you need it. See? Got to train your eyes, machine spirit. Got to train, if you could, got to train your observational skills. Okay. Then we can push the light on the chest a little bit more. Right. So we create this nice shape with the chest. Okay. And then I think it's a little odd here that we don't have some light hitting the shoulder, right? We'd probably get at least a bit of light, even if like the lighting is coming in more from like the left side like this. We're going to get at least some like on the shoulder here. Right? And then if you want, then you could come in and like maybe push the beard a little bit more, give a little more shape to the beard, right? We think about the basic forms of this stuff. These little football shapes to the braids. That's American football to you guys. All right, so we push that light and contrast. All right. See how dark it was? Right. Hope that helps. Hi, Matt. Hi, Sam. Gino Cudiero. Hi, Eric. I noticed that sometimes my minis get a subtle grainy texture on the surface. I think it comes from my painting technique, but I'm not exactly sure why. Do you know what could be causing it? There's a couple things that can be causing grainy texture. Instead of giving you feedback on the model, I'm going to answer your question, okay? The model, it's all right. It needs some definition and stuff, and probably could use a little more atmosphere, like really pushing some like super bright colors. And the metallic and stuff needs work, but you're doing okay. Like, keep pushing. But yeah, instead of doing specific feedback on the miniature at the moment, let's talk about your question. I can see the bumpiness you're talking about, right? You guys see some of that bumpy graininess. So let's okay. Let me grab a piece of paper. So we have our paper towel here, yeah? We have a sheet of paper, and I have some paints on my palette. Let's grab a brush. We'll grab a big one to demonstrate. So here's my dirty ass paint water. That's fine. Okay, needs to be changed out. It's from my painting session last night. So I rinse the brush. All right, rinse the brush. There's a ton of water in the brush, like a lot. Okay, I need to remove some of that. I use the paper towel to remove it, but the brush is still wet. All right, so it's moist. Morph knows. All right. So then we're going to take a color like this purple, okay? And we're going to load. I don't have the what's it called on camera. Hold on. Let me get the wet palette on camera. And then switch to this. All right. It'll zoom out in a second. It should anyways. Yeah, there it goes. Okay. So I'm loading my absolute disaster of, let's use the green actually, because that was the last color I used. That purple's older. All right. So we're just going to load it up with some green. Okay. Now, this is the thing I see people do. Okay. They'll take the brush, they'll load, and then someone along the way told them to like unload the brush on a paper towel. I don't know why. But what happens is as you start to paint, this is quite fluid, so it's not doing it. But if we load the brush with paint, okay, let's use the purple, and then do that, what happens is this, okay? So this is called breaking. You can see that the paint is breaking. It's not, there's not enough water, there's not enough moisture in the brush, okay? Right. So the brush is moist. Okay, there's plenty of water here. I load the brush with some paint. All right. I can then unload some on other parts of the wet palette. All right, let's grab, this is a little less fluid. It's better to do this with like a paint that's not sucked up a bunch of moisture, right, from sitting overnight. But you can see line. It's going to run out of pigment before it runs out of water. All right. So I loaded it with green and then brown. So now you're starting to see the green come through. All right. So look, the paint's not breaking. Instead, it's running out of pigment. So it's becoming more transparent than it is breaking, right? Maybe it starts to break a little bit, but now we're just like into some leftover green. And now the you can see as it starts to like break a little, that's because now we're out of water. All right. So what happens is when you're basically, when you do this and you load the brush with a bunch of paint, okay, we load the brush and then you wipe it on a paper towel like that. There's still pigment in the brush, but you suck all the water out first. So because the pigment is more dense, it tends to stay in the brush more, where when you do this, all the water gets like wicked out of the brush into the paper towel, and then you end up running out of water first, and then the brush starts to break, okay? And this, you're basically kind of like dry brushing. And it results in like, yeah, it can result in the sort of grainy texture, okay? So there is times to do this, all right? Sometimes you want this sort of effect, okay? What you want to do, like when you're edge highlighting, right? Maybe if you're doing edge highlights, you want a little less water because you don't want it to run everywhere, and you want to be able to just do like the thin edge thing, right? Like you want to use the side of the brush almost like a more moist dry brush, right? A little thicker dry brush, and do like the edge highlights, okay? So that's a actual good time to remove some on the paper towel. But when you're doing layering, you don't want to suck all the water out onto the paper towel, because it can result in it getting like this, and then you get this scratchy, nasty surface. I've heard to do it with, but why? Like, what do you do? Like, what's the point? Like, what are you achieving by doing this? And like unloading the brush a little bit, okay? Like, so then just don't load the brush as much. When you, like, if you want less paint, just pick up less paint, you know? So do you use the paper? Yes, I do. After I rinse and the brush is like full of water, I use the paper towel to wick off some of the moisture from the brush, so that I have like the level of moisture in the brush that I want. Right? And then I can load the brush with paint and do that. The other thing here, okay? The other way that this graininess happens, this is the other thing that can cause it. Towley, thanks for the tier 1. Appreciate it. This is the other thing that happens. People do this. How many of you are notorious for doing what I'm doing right now? So, what's happening, and you can see it. Look at these little, can you see them? There's like actual, like, can you guys see that? So what's happening? You're basically like, it's like sweeping the floor, and the pigment is drying, and then you're like brushing it into piles. So you're like picking up the drying pigment off the surface, and you're just shuffling dry pigment around into little piles. Okay? And that's the other thing that can cause these little bumps. So, like, if you want to layer, right? Like, paint a layer, let it dry. Come on. Come on. Camera. Okay. Paint a layer, let it dry, then paint another layer on top, and then let it dry. Right? I don't want to touch that right now. It's wet. You can see it's still wet. Okay. Paint another layer. Let it dry. Paint another. And then this is pretty watery right now, so you can see that I'm like building layers on top. But you need to let it dry in between, and then you'll get a much smoother surface overall. All right? Now to cut that out of the video and then turn that into a reel. I'm not doing that. Maybe I'll do that. Okay, makes sense? Okay, A-Bear paints. Picking back up on an old work in progress. Having the most trouble with her bronze gold leg armor. It was NMM, but I got frustrated and now it's TMM. Okay, that's fine. TMM's cool. Bit of work needed all over. The hair in the background are work in progress, so you can ignore that. Okay. Ooh, that is very zoomed in. Oh, give me some guys, take the picture. Give me some breathing room so I can see the figure. Eric, Quick question before we move on. For filters and glazes, do you wick it off on a towel or just on your palette? Tends to be on my palette, or I'll use my like thumb. I tend to do it on the palette, and then I check on my thumbnail because it's a similar surface to how my glaze, if it's like too loaded or not. And if it's too loaded, I'll remove some. Or what I'll do is I'll mix. Here, I'll switch back to the camera real fast so you can see. We'll switch to this camera. Okay. The palette cam. It's normally cut off, so now you guys can see the things around it, like my mouse and stuff. Okay. So the other thing I'll do is if I'm going to mix a glaze, let me find a spot. So I'll take some of this and I'll put it over here and I'll add some water, whatever. And it's like, this is way too loaded at the moment. There's way too much paint in this. So I'll remove it and then rinse the brush, remove it. And then now that I've got a mix, now I can pick some up. And it's like, now I can check to make sure I have enough. Okay, so I don't need to like remove it from the paper towel. It was like, yeah, make the mixture, clean the brush, then pick it up and use what you mixed, right? Okay, pretty good. It's not bad. I like the skin, but we are making some cardinal sins of OSL. All right, go watch the glow video. But what does light do? Okay. What can light only do to things? Yay, it makes them brighter. All right. So let's do the thing real fast. You guys know the thing. Okay. What's going on here? All right. Are we getting any sense of light from the flame? And also, this gets a little weird because when you do like these sort of flame trails, right? The OSL becomes complicated in this way. Right? So, where is really the source of the OSL on these two things? Where is the source of the source light? So those are the source. This is more just like a motion trail kind of thing. If this flame is getting this dark at this point, like where it's starting to like die out and turn red, this is no longer really the source of the flame. So we're not really going to have much in terms of like light coming off of the tail, right? We need to consider more that the hands are the actual light source, okay, than anything else. So where is the orange here coming from? Right. So what we want, anywhere near the hands is where you're going to have the most light source. So that means, and light, like we said, can only add, okay? So it's like on the face and in these like shadow areas of the face is where you're going to get like the flame coming off of her hand. Creating a light source like that. Okay. Then the further away you get from this, the weaker it is. All right, and it drops off. It drops off like this. It's a curve in strength. So it's an inverse square, right? So something that's twice as far away. One that can't even reach there, because the shoulder blocks it. But but these are basically the same distance, right? So it's like her face and the shoulder are basically the same distance away. So we don't have to worry too much about that. Then the second thing is like, can light overpower the sunlight? Probably not. It depends on what the environment is, but like it's very likely that this would even do really anything to this blue. Like maybe it lightens it a little bit, but it's not going to affect it so much that it really matters. But this also means like here, right? Like all of the bottom side of her arm and stuff should be quite affected by the glow. Maybe a bit of her back maybe gets affected. These like things that are all quite close to the hand will be affected, you know. But then this stuff down here really doesn't make sense to be affected that much by the flame, because they are this is like this tail of the flame trail isn't really casting like light so much. Okay, it's more like a visual effect. Then we need to get some light like in these parts. Okay. Like you can do it a little bit if you want, just to add like a little something, you know. But I would be very careful in how much you try and do an effect like this. Right? You don't want a whole lot of that light coming in there. Okay, and then this stuff, right? All this red. That flame is too weak to overpower the natural lighting of the scene. Okay? Then if you're going to do some like cracked glowing rock stuff from below, then you can take and create like a really warm deep brown and do something like this if you want. If you want like a general like lava ambience from underneath, like yeah, you can do that. But just remember, you can't ever go darker than the color can't darken anything. Light can only make things brighter than they are. So you figure out what the shadows are and then go from there. Okay? Cool. The OSL lesson for today. All right. I'm going to take another quick break. I will be back in a few minutes and then we will continue on. I'm not going to read all this. Okay, give me the TLDR. Base is far from being done, blah, blah, blah. I'm mostly curious how to improve the overall cohesion, whether NMM are reflecting the light correctly, and maybe an idea of what to do with the base next. Thanks in advance. There we go. Let's look at this one. Smooth, little airbrushy, little airbrushy feeling in some parts. I think the metal looks quite nice in general. I like the color palette, feels pretty good. Base, obviously, I need some work and some texture. It's a little weird compositionally how like perfectly circular it feels. So that's a little strange. I feel like this is like, I don't quite understand why this is so like perfectly circular compared to the rest. You know? So it's like, I feel like you like did it on one base and then did another base. I know sometimes, so like, what's going on there? What's up with that? Like I would expect other chunks and stuff to be out here somewhere. And it's like if these are tiles, like there should be. So it's a little odd. The actual like painting on this stuff is all looking quite good, honestly. Like pretty sharp and clean. I think the magenta and stuff looks quite nice. There's some parts where I think you could be like a little sharper, you know. There's specifically on like Warhammer figures, the hands I think I find are very important. If you look at like my Space Marines, here I can show you real quick, actually. The hands. Okay. Look at the fingers. Give those fingers some definition, right? We want to be like pretty sharp on the fingers and hands. They're important. Okay, so on yours, like there's just not quite enough. So like try and get some nice edge highlights and stuff on here in order to give some more definition to the fingers. Them hands, dude. Wherever they need to be in order to increase that readability, you know? I want to define those hands. So same with any of these parts, like you want sort of these areas around the face, the collar, like to have a higher definition, which I think you've done a pretty good job. But increasing the definition in the really important parts, you know. As far as the metallics, I like the colors you're using. I think they're quite strong. I think the highlights are placed mostly pretty well. There's maybe some parts where I think same thing sort of here, where you could probably go a little further with it in order to give some more focus like on towards the face and stuff. So you can really like push some of the light here in order to make this like a big focal point. right? Similar to how you did on the shoulder. So it's nice that you're like pushing the light here on these like focal areas, right? But that said, like this is probably a little too flat. So some of this like light yellow, you could push this up a little bit more. Really try and like make sure you get all these little rivets and stuff, get some nice edge definition. Don't forget to come back and paint the rivets. Well, you did most of them, but then you missed a few. Okay, so that stuff's pretty good. Even the areas like here, like push these out a little bit, even if they're like underneath them, because it's like so dark under here. You can exaggerate a little bit in order to give a little more light. It might just be the photograph, and maybe you did, but you can push some of these parts a little bit in order to, yeah, give some shape. Like I can't even read what's going on in here because of the shadow. But so that stuff's quite nice. The other thing I would say is you've done this and you've used the airbrush and it works pretty well, but you can sort of see this like speckling here. Come back, right? And like think about like start to define some of these smaller folds a little bit, right? Like you've used the airbrush, now come in and like the airbrush only gives you directional lighting, okay? Diffused lighting. You have to come in and paint the specular highlights, all right? So think about what kind of, how shiny his leathery skin would be, and you need to paint that like shine on there yourself. The airbrush will only ever give you directional light. It will never give you specular highlighting, all right? So you've got to come in and decide where that specular light should be. Is he kind of slimy? Like, should he have like quite white highlights on some of these parts? You know, you can push that where you want in order to, like I'm looking at it and I go, okay, maybe there should be like a specular highlight that kind of runs down like that, so we can really come in and like push some of the leatheriness of the skin and parts. And maybe you do it with like stippling, because it's like maybe he has tiny scales. Like is it like an eel or is it scales? We can make a more interesting effect after using the airbrush, right? I give it a little more hand painted finish to it. The sword, yeah, the sword based on the angle. This is always hard because it's like causes the mini to not always look the best from the main view. This is the thing with the newer Games Workshop figures. They're made much more to be like interesting from like multiple angles than they used to be, because when they used to be made like this, where it's just like I'm a space marine and he stands like this, right? Here I'm going to draw an old space marine. every Space Marine basically just stood like that. So it's like, yeah, they worked great from one angle because they made them in basically two-part molds out of metal. So they were very like static and flat. And even if they had a sword, it was like the sword just like stuck out like from the side like this. And it was always like the flat of the blade was like facing towards you. You know, you get this like super nice like main view because of how flat it is. And now people complain, they're like, oh, the main view doesn't work as well. Which can be a little awkward when taking photos and stuff. So sometimes you have to like try and find a secondary view that it works well from, and find where that main light needs to go. But like maybe you could just take in like on the edge here, increase the light on the sword a little bit in order to make it stand out a little more. Like even on this guy I painted earlier, so you can see like what's the main view of this guy, right? It's like, is it like this? Well, in this case, if this is the main view, man, like this dagger is so foreshortened that you can't see it all at all. But it's like from here, it looks really nice, right? So, but it's like the main photography view of this is super weird and not great. It's like from here, it looks pretty good. You can see the knife more. This knife looks great. But this knife is like weird and foreshortened and pointy, you know? So some of these newer figures, like they look really cool from above, you know, when you're looking down on them at the table. They don't always necessarily look great at the main from every angle. But yeah, man, this is going well. Like, just try and be consistent with the light placement, and then the other thing I would say is like try and find some spots, right, where you can come in and really like catch some super bright light on some of these points. I'm going to give some further definition to this stuff where we can. Okay. I hope that makes sense to you. Keep going. Keep pushing it. This is good. I like this. Here's another area where you can come in and like sometimes you get these little shapes like this, so you can sort of like connect this. It's like use a highlight in the recess instead of a shadow to create that inside curve there on the metallic, right? Sort of did it here. But yeah, metal is weird like that, and sometimes you actually get, actually quite often you get highlights like on the interior curve, you know? And yeah, as far as the base, I would add more chunks and stuff. It's like, it's too circular at the moment, like more chunks and then add more cracks and debris on the like more flat section. Like this will break up this roundedness more. Maybe do like a chunk like building up off of this. Just try and like break up that circle. Okay. Cool. This is cool. I really like the like snake eye gem thing. It's neat. All right. Stormcrow. Good afternoon, Eric. I'd love to hear your thoughts on the role. Decapitator. I consider the skin leather an axe. Head more or less done. I guess for the first time I'm asking for feedback. I'd like general feedback, anything like or change. Okay. This blood is not great. All right. I think that overall this is quite good. I like the skin. Again, why you guys crop the image in so much? I can't even see the base. Yeah, I like how this is going. There's some nice focus on the face. So that's all quite good. Let's talk about blood effects. So this is not exactly like realistic looking. It's too red. It looks like red paint instead of blood. You want like a red ink or clear red from Tamiya is really good. And there's a couple of tricks you can do to do a blood effect, okay? So I'll show, let me see if I have something real quick. All right, so give me 2 seconds. All right. Yeah, Tamiya Clear Red's good. Red ink is also nice. Like the Vallejo red ink works quite good. There's 2 ways I like to do it. Let me turn the airbrush on. So mixing a little black with red ink will work well. Zoom out a little. So I'm gonna grab, let's do this camera angle so you guys can see everything. So I'm just gonna put some red ink here. Okay. And you mix a bit of black into it, right? Get a nice like dark red like this. So this is going to be like too watery. You can, like, if you do this, it's too much. So one way to do it is to put it, like, it's hard to paint it this way, but you can like build it up on a card like this, and then you can kind of like flick it like that. You get some blood splatter, and the more or less you have, right? See, get these little like splatters like that. So that's one way to do it. Get a really natural looking effect like that. The other way is to grab the airbrush if you want like a bit more of a misty effect. You load up the brush like this. So you load it up. So there's a bunch of paint in the brush. And then you take and you hold it close to the model like this. And right? This requires a little more control. You probably want to do it with a smaller brush than this that holds less paint. But you can get a very You can get a more like misted blood effect like that. Right? So instead of doing it with like this big brush that holds too much paint in it, let me grab a smaller brush, right? Something much tinier like this. So you take the brush, maybe remove just a little bit, and then right, lower, a little bit lower air pressure, and you can tap. And this one's gonna go like more all over the place, but you can get some nice little spray splatters like that, as opposed to the flick method, which gives you more like of a bigger like, you know. So this is more like a directional, and this is more like a mist. Okay. That. Yeah. All right. Then you can go back and like hand paint blood streaks and stuff where you want it, but. Cool. Blood. All right. Let's see. This camera. Okay. So, point being, like, this is, yeah, it's like too consistent across the whole edge. You want it more like somewhere in the middle, right? So it's like it's like splattered like from the center out. So more of the edge should probably show more of the metal, like, and then hopefully he hits people with more of the center of the axe. Right? Also, like, if you're gonna do this, like, just take some putty or something and mask him off, because he's, like, unless you want some bloodstains across his face, right? No, I think this is okay. Doesn't bother me. The blood should be darker anyways. It should be, like, a deep, like, crimson-y red. You want it, like... It should really be like dark red, you know? And then as it gets more transparent, you can see it's like a brighter, more intense red. But it should be, yeah, like this like deep crimson red, right? And carmine, sanguine. Now I've got a second reel that I can post now. Wow. I just gotta cut out some clips of this week's Feedback Friday. How to do blood effects real fast. Mark. Hi, Eric. Grateful for any feedback on this one. Okay, pretty good. I like this guy. He's cool. I don't love the face though. All right, I like all the mossy stuff growing on him. It's very cool. Reminds me of like Skyrim sort of. Albert Street. You have to be a sub. You join the disc. You have to be a sub, and you join the Discord. Yeah. So the one thing I'm not loving is I wish there was some more showing his face. Okay, like. I get you're trying to do the dark glow, but we could at least like add some light to the teeth and bone, right? Even if it's supposed to be like kind of in shadow, like give me something here. I want to see some of these I don't even know what's going on back in here. Right, give me at least some detail on the face. Okay. There's also some parts here where like some of this stuff's getting lost, you know. I like the base. I would like even a little more of this like mossy stuff like on maybe other parts of his armor. Like he did it nicely on the chest, but maybe some like on his legs. Just some on the arm or something, you know. Especially on the shield, like if this is wood, like give me some like green mildewy colors like on the shield a little bit. Would help. And then I think this purple, so you're doing a little too much edge highlighting here and not enough like making sure that we define this cloth like against the light of the next volume, right? So try and like push that light up more so that we really can see like this definition between the plates, right? Oops, I've been drawing on the wrong layer the whole time. Right, whatever is going on right here. We just want to try and increase this definition a little more so we can see that this is... Here, I can do it this way. Oops. Right, so now we can see, like, you know, pushing that a little more makes those shapes a little more clear. Then I would take the airbrush and I would grab some sort of maybe dark purplish red kind of color, something like this. And I would apply, where's the airbrush? Here we go. I would try and add a little more shadow around like the less important parts of the base, okay? So it's like almost like a vignetting style effect here. These warmer or these like warmer shadows are going to make these greens feel a little cooler, right? You've already got this kind of cold white light on the figure, so you can further increase that sort of effect, right, by darkening in some of these parts. It's like the top of this is not interesting, you know? It's like, just let it be darker, right? New painter here. Do you absolutely need an airbrush to do decent? No, absolutely not. Majority of my figures, I don't use an airbrush at all other than to prime them. But it makes certain effects like this much easier. It's just another tool. All right, so you can do stuff like that, and that'll help make him stand out a little bit more, because I feel like he gets maybe a little lost. Right, this will make him a little more focal. Right, cool. Trying to get through as many as I can today. We've got Albie Stream. I don't know how to say that. Maybe it's Albest Ream. Exclamation point Discord. And then read the server guide. Gotta link your account. Rui! Mr. Rui! So all he's worked on is the face, it seems, but nice job blocking in at least like the hands and the cloak and the hair, giving you some context around the face at least. I would probably do the bow also. But let's look at the face. So one, I think really nice in terms of like values, really good. So that's going quite nice. Now, how do we make this more interesting? Okay, so couple little things. One thing you're doing here is you're really, no, I don't want the airbrush anymore. I want the painting. There we go. I feel like you're really like pushing this light up too much here. Like this is good, right? You have these more rounded shapes. On the face here, it's like I feel like you're really pushing it maybe a little too high as opposed to a little more forward. Like if we think about the nose, how far forward this is, like where on the cheek would that be? It'd probably be like here somewhere, right? And then it's like you have it here on the forehead. It would probably repeat like, but it's like, it's sort of here, right? It's sort of here. Okay. Well, where else do we see sort of that like here a little bit, here definitely. Good job on the lips. And then like you might have something like here, right? Put some light on the ears, or that ear at least, if the light's coming in from that direction. Okay, so now let's make those adjustments. All right, so we're gonna grab our a highlight color, and let's, instead of, let's darken some of the one. Let's push the light on this volume a little more. And then kind of connect this. So we're going to reshape the face a little bit there by bridging that shape, okay? All right, so even just that, like, look at what this does to the face. Okay, we can do the same over here. All right, now let's tone this back so we can make it a little more round, right? So it's not everything is so like sharp, right? This is too dark here. This should be more of like a light value. You don't need to overdo that little line. Okay. All right, so now let's grab the highlight and we're gonna like, let's take a white, right? And just like place those highlights where we see them, right? So it's like one's here, probably one's gonna like catch right here a little bit. Here, here. But what does that mean for this? It means that actually the inside of this is going to catch some highlight, right? Maybe a little bit right here. Okay. The forehead maybe a slightly more broad. All right, so now we blend those out, okay? So we take a lighter skin tone value and we need to soften this into the rest of the skin, okay? The one on his nose is going to be the sharpest, the nose and the lips specifically. All right. If the light's coming in from this direction, a bit more of like the side of his eyelid is going to be in light. So it's more, think of them as like they're a half sphere, right? So not the whole underside, but more the side of them is in shadow. Okay. And then a little bit more shadow here. Like that. All right. So let's look at before and after. Okay. So it's like, it's not a huge difference. Okay. But what it does is it like reshapes the face just a little bit and makes it a little less cartoony feeling and a little more naturalistic. All right. Like making these things, always try and think of these things are like these lights are very round, right? You probably also pulled, just one other quick little thing, you probably also pulled this light a little too far over. Probably want to bring that shadow in just a little bit. The Terminator here should be a little further in. All right, cool. I am not going to get to them all today. Baby stapler. I could probably do like 2 more. Working on Morka from Hera. Any advice on the skin or general color composition? Yes. Okay. So you're going for this like yellow purple complementary color scheme. And that works, right? But you're being too like the other parts are way too neutral for one thing. And then you're not like playing around and like varying the color, right? Yes, I post them afterwards. So this is the sort of thing where now, like, let's take this image. Oops. Let's take this. We're going to duplicate it. Okay. And let's play around with like the shadows. All right. So beyond just making things like a purple and yellow skin, purple fur complementary. What if we introduce some of those colors elsewhere, right? So like if we take the shadows, right, and we shift them purple, right? So now we've shifted the shadows purple. There's now some purple in the grays, there's some purple in the whites, there's some purple in the skin, all right? And then we take the highlights and we shift those highlights a little yellowish. Right, now I introduce some warmer tones into the other parts too. So you start to create some like cohesion between some like color harmony between the two colors so they don't feel so perfectly separated. Like everything on the model just feels like I'm going to place this color here, I'm going to place this color here, right? We can use a bit of the shadow color, the purple in the fur, to introduce some of that color into the yellow, right? And we start to create some more harmony throughout. So like look at the difference between this and this, right? Which one feels more interesting? I didn't change the color scheme. The color scheme's the same, right? But which one feels like more harmonious? Chat, this is where you're supposed to say the edit. Yeah. Okay, so this is what I want you to try and do. All right, when you're working with colors, start to play around a little bit with colors from other parts of the model in your other parts, right? So you're mixing a little more. You're cross-contaminating your colors with other colors from the scene, okay? And it'll make for a more interesting scene overall, more interesting piece, okay? It's also going to add more life to the skin because you can see now there's more reddish, like magenta tones in the skin and stuff. Adds more, right? more variation. Boone! Who else we got? Murph's in here too. Man, all you guys are like in and watching today. Alright, I'm gonna try and go through some of them a little quick, but I don't want to like feel like I'm not giving you guys enough time. I will go until 4:30. Hi Eric, hope everything is fine. This is the last finished project, and I'd love to have your feedback and your thought about composition on the bass. That's my weak spot. It's fine. The bass is okay. It's just this is kind of boring. I don't know, maybe some arrows or something would make it more interesting. Like you could try and use some arrows to draw attention where you want, like arrows stuck in the ground. These figures are so tiny. I often wonder sometimes like what the heck you do with a figure like this for its base. I don't think it's bad by any means. It's just like, yeah, I get where you're coming from, and you're like, how do I make it more interesting? You add more stuff, basically, right? And it's like, maybe it needs like some rocks or like a little rock here or there or something like, but I think you did that. No, it's just the shield and the helmet. So the helmet's cool. The broken shield is cool. Maybe some little rocks, right? And maybe some arrows. And like that could make the base more interesting. As far as the actual figure, man, like I know these things are tiny. It looks quite good. The cape is maybe a little sharp, but I like how it does fit the style, so I don't have too much of a problem with it. I like how you're rendering like in the valleys properly. That's really good. You could maybe soften it a little bit, okay? Shadow side's a little boring. The chainmail could also definitely be sharper, right? Sword's pretty good. The chainmail's a little boring, all right, a little dull. So this is pretty good, but you did. It's mostly correct. It's not quite right. Here, we'll look at this one. So, you have a ring, right? It's a donut. Otherwise known as a torus. So you have a ring like this, right? And you place a highlight on it, all right? And that highlight, you're deciding to place it in the top left. Well, because it's a ring, any reflection that's in the top left, or I should say top left, right? Up here, that reflection then repeats in the bottom right on the interior edge of a torus. So you get repeating reflections, right? And the same thing would happen as if you had like a ground reflection here, right? Say there's some sort of ground reflection, that ground reflection would repeat on the opposite side. Okay? So, that's to say that with your chainmail, right, you have a highlight, you put a little highlight here, yeah? Well, that highlight then needs to go on this little bottom section of the ring. Right? That means that needs to repeat on the bottom left of these rings. So top left, bottom left. This will also give a little more, like they have to interlock with each other and stuff, but giving a little more definition to each one so you could see the shape of the ring mail a little more, right? Okay, right? So try and get that going on. And that'll give you some more shape. And just, try and add a little more light in general across them because they're blending a little too much into the background. I get they're really tiny, right? But I believe in you. It's not so much about making noise. Like you just want it to read let's look at the difference, right? Like back here, you almost can't even really see the rings, right? At least this, you can kind of start to see that there's more information in there, right? And then it gives you something to look at when it's up close. Murph. Hi, Eric. This is the latest bust I'm working on. Most of it's still work in progress. I'm looking for feedback on color choices. Is anything looking strange or out of place? Do the leaves on the collar work? How can I better sell the bounce reflections on the breastplate? I think they work okay. The moss on the shoulders works all right. So, does anyone know what this color scheme is called? I immediately recognized it, but do you guys know? Oh, almost. Not triadic. Not split. How many colors do you see? All right, what's the first color you see? Hey, it's double complementary. Or tetradic. So green's the first one. Got it. Boom, green. All right, easy, right? We got that. We got that one. We got green, right? Okay, what's next? What's the next hue you see? Red. Yep. Okay. So red's next. We'll go a little more. Okay, there's one complementary. Yellow, purple, and yellow, right? So we got purple. And we have yellow. So this is a double complementary color scheme. So your color choices work perfectly fine. Now, how can we make it tie together a little better? This needs more definition, by the way. One, I think your yellows are a little, the crown is missing some more intense sort of saturated yellow tones. You can do green, but you want to, it's a little flat and you didn't quite push the lights high enough. For metallic, really got to push those highlights. This is where you need the metallics need the most value contrast, okay? So the actual color palette is quite good, but what we need to do is we need to introduce some more colors elsewhere, right? So it's not, doesn't feel so split up. The obvious, I think the skin probably still needs more work, I'm guessing. And then yeah, you need more highlights, all right? So like, okay, don't be afraid to push some of these lights, right? And they don't have to be huge, but you need to create some highlights in here in order to give a little more life to the materials, so not everything just looks kind of like flat. As far as, yeah, how do you tie some of these colors together a little more? Similar to what we did on Baby Stapler's piece, right? It's like you pick a shadow tone and then we kind of work with that. So of the two complementaries, which one do you think would work better for kind of applying to the overall ambience of the figure? I think either could work. Let's do both, right? Let's take this, duplicate it, and duplicate it. So this one we're going to do purple, and we'll do purple and yellow, right? So we'll go a little blue, a little magenta. So we'll apply some more purple throughout. And then in the highlights, we'll go a little more yellowish, right? So we could do like something like that. Or we can go, maybe we go more reddish in the shadows, or we go greenish in the shadows. So here we could go like a little more green, and then in the highlights we shift a little more red. Right, so this one gives us maybe this one's a little more naturey, you know? Like you might feel like of the two that this one feels a little more foresty. Right, so between these two, like they both have very different feelings. They're the exact same color palette, right? But all three of them have very different ambiances. So this one's kind of very neutral, right? This one's like a little more magical, maybe, and then this one is very like nature. Yeah, you just shift the color. It's not always adding that color. Sometimes it's just shifting that color towards the other color, right? An easy trick is to just mix a bit of the color that you want into the shadows, right? But then sometimes it's like that can often result in like a very muddy color, like it turns very brown or black. Sometimes you need to just like move around the wheel towards that color, right? Like how do you shift in that direction? Like I'm going to take, instead of like I want to turn this red blue, like I want to shift the shadows blue. Well, how do I move in that direction, right? What's in between this and blue, right? So I want to shift it cold. Oh, well, I got to go through purple first, right? So instead of using like literal blue, if I mix this with blue, it's going to result in like a super muddy color. Where if I shift instead, like through the colors, I'm going around the wheel, right? I can go through the purple first. Exactly. Go around the wheel, not through it. Okay? Yeah, I said I was going to stop at 4:30. It is 4:29. I think that will do it for today. That isn't a New Kingdoms bust. Thanks for hanging out, guys. I hope it was informative. And I will get to the rest of them on the next one, I promise.